Thanks for tuning in to our podcast about public education and who's really in charge, the program in which we find out the impact of government on all levels in the school system. I'm David.
And I'm Logan. On today's show, we're looking at federal government's role in education. You might think your school is governed by your principal or local district, but actually the federal government has a significant impact on what happens in classrooms across the country.
The U.S. Constitution does not actually address education, and yet the federal government has ample control, particularly control over dollars and national policy.
All right, one of the strongest mechanisms by which the federal government impacts schooling is finance. The Department of Education, formed in 1979, helps guide billions of dollars to the schools around the country.
And then to rub salt in the wound, the national government only pays a bare majority of the cost for education, around 8 to 10%, but only with conditions.
Exactly. Consider title funding, for instance. That's federal grant money that filters down to poverty schools, but schools must adhere to some federally required stipulations to receive it, such as special treatment or low performance.
Another enormous source of federal spying on schools is regulation and rulemaking on education. The largest of these were No Child Left Behind Act of 2002.
The NCLB was great. They made schools give children standardized tests that held the schools accountable for how well the kids did on the test. If the schools were not doing a certain level, they could lose funds or even the state take them over.
It was then followed by the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, which provided additional power in setting up education goals, but testing is a monstrous problem in schools because of federal policies.
And let's not forget about special education. IDEA is federally mandated, and it prevents students with disabilities from getting the accommodations they're supposed to get, i.e. IEPs and other learning accommodations.
That's important because otherwise, schools would not legally be bound to provide those services. The federal government also acts through post-secondary schooling in the form of Pell Grants and federally supported student loans.
But perhaps the most controversial topic of today is the federal government stepping in and forgiving student loans. There's been so much debate over whether or not government should be forgiving student loans, and that should impact so many college students down the line.
So schools are mostly state and local, but the federal government plays such a significant role in finance, legislation, and big education policies.
Exactly, and while their budget is a very tiny percentage, it breaks and creates schools, especially in poor neighborhoods.
And that's only the federal government. In the next episode, we'll break down how state governments control what we learn in school.
Thank you for watching our podcast, listening to our podcast about public education and who's really in charge.